Joanne Teresa Stanga. I'm 58, born in Galt, Ontario, which is now Cambridge. Had a couple nicknames, Joe Angel and Mojo. We moved to Orillia in '67, our family, and I think it was an introduction. The Stanga family was introduced to lacrosse. My brothers started playing. I think the Minor Lacrosse Association got started in '67 in Orillia, so they started learning the game. They got loaner sticks, they learned all the basics. My parents got involved in the minor association, and I got involved because I was the baby of the family, and I followed everybody around and had a stick in my hand and played a lot. Back in those days, there were no opportunities for young girls to play. So, I'm 6 years old at that time. So my involvement was sitting in the backseat of the car, driving around Ontario to all the arenas. It wasn't until I was in my mid-teens, 16, 17, that Orillia got a box team. And that team was made up of some girls who were like me and traveled with their brothers, and so kind of knew a little bit about the game. Some of them had never seen the game, didn't know what it was about, but they were friends and they wanted to be active. And that first team that we had, we didn't win a game that season, but I think that team, it was the best team experience that I'd ever had, and sort of fashioned the way that I thought about teams as I, became a coach in later years. So I have two brothers, Dave and Steve, and a sister, Mary Rose. She's the oldest. She was the executive director of the Ontario Lacrosse Association in the late '70s, early '80s. And I think she had said she was like the first female executive director of a male-dominant sport at the sports center at the time. So she kind of had that pathway. My brothers, of course, started playing minor box. Steve went through to, I think, junior C in Orillia. Dave played in Orillia, then he moved to Hamilton and played with a Hamilton team. And I think he played on a national squad at some point. And he said he was about 18 during that time, so that would have been early '70s probably. They were involved with the Orillia Minor Lacrosse, and then later my dad, I believe, was a member of the board for at the time it was called the OMLA, the Ontario Lacrosse Association. I work for Magna International. I've been there, this year I'll have been there 32 years, and I manage the global intranet. So we're now in 29 countries, and we've got 140,000 employees, and we've got about 23 different languages, and we're trying our best to communicate to everybody. So that has been, I've sort of been in that position for about the last 8 years. It has really helped, with the creative side of, bringing out the creative side in me, I guess. So the technical part of it, the creative part of it, the communication aspect, all those things together, quite a challenge for me, but right now I feel like I'm in the best part of my career. Yeah, it's actually, as a youngster, baby of the family, I think I was always sort of very shy. I let everybody else do the talking, and very, really not one to get out in front of people and, have to say what I'm thinking or whatever. And being in different leadership roles in lacrosse over the years, I think really helped develop that side of me, where I was just kind of forced to do it, and so didn't really think about it, just did it, and over time got a little bit more comfortable with it, a little better. And certainly from an organizational standpoint, when you're managing, I headed up the women's field lacrosse organization in Ontario, and so managing that, I think, really gave me a good understanding of how to multitask, how to do a lot of different things, serve a lot of different people. Yeah. When I first moved to Toronto after I graduated from university, my very first job was at the Ontario Lacrosse Association. And when I was there, I met a girl who was doing her master's and sort of doing an internship at the OLA, and she told me about a women's field lacrosse team she was playing on. So I went out for a practice and saw what they were doing. I thought, wow, this is great, because I haven't played for a few years, and it's a different kind of game, but same stick skills. And so I had the opportunity to play. This was like the one team really that was operating in Ontario at the time. So it was the provincial team, and that's where I met Paul Gilkinson. He was coaching this group of girls, and later that summer this group was going to the national championships in Saskatchewan. So I went to this team, with this team to the championships. And on this team were Barb Boys and Noreen Lem, both who were members of the '82 World Cup team. And make a long story short, well, maybe it's going to make it longer, but at this tournament, they were making selections for the '86 World Cup team, and we were all selected for it. So over the course of the next year, that was '85, we were going out to BC to work for tryouts. And at the end of the tryouts and whatnot, we got back to Toronto, and we had a note from the head coach, and none of us had made it. But at that time, both Barb and I, said to each other, we're never going to let this happen to anybody else in Ontario. That was sort of, I think, the spark that started the growth of Ontario women's field lacrosse. And so that summer, I still remember Barb and Noreen and I sitting around my little coffee table at my apartment in Toronto. We started to map out Ontario women's field lacrosse. And Noreen was going to be the chair, Barb was the technical person, and I was the sort of secretary-treasurer. So that was sort of my first position. And then Noreen moved on. Noreen was a sport administrator. She moved on, and I took over the role as chairperson. We officially put in place Ontario Women's Field Lacrosse, and that was sort of the birth of it. I carried on in that position for 18 years, but those were there was a lot going on. We went from one team, a couple high school teams, to several levels. So under 19 we started, we had a senior, we went to under 15 at that time. So by the time I was done, sort of we were at that level. So in and amongst that time as well, I took on the chairperson's role, sector chair for women's lacrosse with the CLA, so in the early 90s. I have been a part of the International Federation, obviously represented Canada at the annual meetings, but also was part, after the change to the Federation of International Lacrosse, became part of the competitions committee. I coached for about 12 years. I coached with 3 national teams, but I got in it kind of as a reluctant coach. So, I had played for 3 years, then I transitioned into sort of the administrative role. We were developing the high school level players, and at that time we thought, I think it's time for a junior provincial team. So we needed a coach for the junior provincial team, and Barb probably said, Joanne, why don't you coach? And I'm like, I don't really want to coach. That's not really my bag. And eventually it's like Barb can be very persuasive, and I ended up coaching, and I said, well, I'll coach 1 year until we find somebody more permanent. And then that turned into 2 years and 3 years, and then the International Federation decided they were going to start the first World Championship for under 19, and I got onto that staff as well. And I was an assistant coach with Trish Nicholson and Brenda Heater. That was 95. So I had been coaching with the provincial team in Ontario, so it was a kind of a natural transition. So we had all these players ready for that transition as well. So that national team, there were 3 girls from BC and then the rest from Ontario. And then kind of moved on from that, moved to head coach for the 99 World Championship, and then did it again in 2003. And then that was sort of the end of my major coaching. Yeah, I haven't talked about Noreen for a while, but so as I mentioned, we met her in '85. She was a sport administrator already. She worked at the Ontario Sports Centre for table tennis, and so she knew all the ins and outs, and she was very knowledgeable, and really helped Barb and I kind of guide our way through the ins and outs. Just a really a super person, and she was not so involved in lacrosse after that, but was always there to, anytime we needed any help, was always there to help guide us. And we thought it was pretty appropriate that because she was so instrumental in helping us create Ontario Women's Lacrosse, that we did dedicate the under 15 championship trophy to her when that league got kicked off. I think that was around 2000. I think most people right now would say that it was an old ladies game back then when we played, and it was only 30 some years ago. But we played with wooden sticks. Plastic sticks, there were plastic sticks coming in, but most of us started out with wood sticks. I think the uniqueness of this game without boundaries was interesting but puzzling for people to watch, because nobody knows a game where you just keep running and then suddenly the whistle blows and you look around and go, well, what happened? So, boundaries did eventually come in, I think around the early 2000s. I think that, the rules were the main difference, right? And there's a story from, the '89 World Championship, and I think it drove a lot of the new rule changes. England was playing the US in the championship game, and it went into overtime. And I think that it wasn't very long after the overtime started that the winner was determined, but England got the ball, I think, off the opening draw, and they started taking it down the field, and the player was kind of coming out to the side of the field and stopped. And her next step was sort of backwards to look for a pass, and the whistle blew. So the no boundaries was, as long as you're progressing play, you're fine. But if you start taking it out of play, that's when they would call the whistle. So she took this very innocuous little step back, the whistle blew, change of possession, and I think the US went and scored. Now, I might have that wrong, but it was, that was kind of the gist of it. And then boundaries came in soon after that. The other thing was just free flow. So all 11 players could go up and down the field. So what you would see is 11 players in the front of the net trying, if you were ahead, trying to prevent the ball from getting in the net. So soon after that, we had the marking area in 3 seconds. And then the restraining line came, and then, on and on. And everything that has come into the game has really just been around safety now, including sticks. So when we started moving to plastic, people thought, oh wow, this is great because wood sticks on the head is not a very safe, safe playing situation, so plastic will be much better. But as the technology got better, suddenly these plastic sticks were, the velocity of release was sending off this missile, and that was determined to be very dangerous. So it was actually Laurie Livingston, a Canadian, who undertook pretty significant research to determine what the specifications of a stick should be so that the velocity of the ball coming out would be within a safe range. And that was around the 2000, 2002. And then there was this massive list of IFWLA approved sticks. And those were the sticks where, you know, the ball would, it wasn't an offset head, and the ball would come out at a safe speed. To be honest, I don't know. There are, I mean, the stick specifications have changed so much now, pretty hard to keep up with where we're at, but that was sort of where it all began. You know, with anything, as you know, the sport develops, the competition increases, the speed, the strength of players continues to increase. You know, there's going to be the risk increases. So we went from, you know, the wood stick, plastic sticks. We introduced goggles to prevent catastrophic eye injury. The next step, which we're already seeing in various places, are helmets. So, you know, a soft-sided helmet of some sort to protect from concussion. Is that the future? I don't know, but I hope it isn't. I hope it isn't, because I do feel like I love the game where it is now. I love the athleticism. I love what the girls are doing, but I also love, you know, the uniqueness that women's field lacrosse once had. I know with the advent of the Olympics, it's very possible it's right around the corner. The game is going to change again. It's going to be something that the world will understand and can appreciate. And so, you know, what that's going to look like, who knows? But I think if the world could appreciate it, then it's great for the game. This is that team of players that I will say that we had a lot of talent on our team, and we had a lot of characters on the team. And I think that's what really made it such a joy to play on. So we're at I will call it the old barn in Orillia, because it really looked like a barn. We were playing our first team, and our first game. I think we were all super nervous because, you know, you can throw the ball against the wall for years and years and years, but when you actually step on the floor and you've got another team across from you, for me it was like, wow, this is really, this is a little bit scary. But yeah, so I think it took a while for us to get the goal. We didn't score a whole lot of goals that season. We did have a lot of our friends and some of our family in the stands, and I managed to finally get the ball in the net. And any shooter will tell you that, you know, the sensation you feel when you see the ball go in the net never goes away. So that's really, you know, what you work hard for. So yeah, so it was really exciting. But I have to continue on with that story, because that was our first game. Our second game was at the Toronto Beaches. We played in Q Beach. And I was carrying the ball up the middle of the floor, dodged, and felt something in my knee. Oh, that didn't feel too good, and I couldn't walk on it. And so I came off the floor and didn't play again, and went to the doctor's the next day, and he took a look and he put a tensor on it, and he said, you know, you stay off that for a couple weeks. So stayed off it for a couple weeks. The swelling went down, it felt pretty good, got back out playing, happened again. Continued to happen. So ACL tears did not have the same sort of protocol back in those days, and it took think it took about 3 or 4 years before I did actually get a diagnosis and had my ACL repaired. So my nickname, Joe Angel, really came from that, because there were games where my knee might go out in the first period or in the first shift, and I'd sit on the bench for the rest of the game. And at the end of the game, when everyone else was soaking wet, I'd be standing there all dry and looking like an angel. When we first started out playing lacrosse in Ontario, we had one team, and we traveled, to the States, or Quebec had a team. We played with them. We were, playing for the love of the game. We didn't really see anything in the future of the game. It was just, we were going to play this summer, and we were going to see what was going to happen next summer. And we have this sport now. I always think back, like, what my 9-year-old self would have thought if she was living today, or if she was, got to play today. Because this 9-year-old person is seeing, girls playing at a world championship in their own community, and playing against girls from Kenya and Puerto Rico and Korea, and meeting all these girls and having fun around the world. And now we're starting to talk about lacrosse in the Olympics. And who doesn't play anything without dreaming about being able to play in the Olympics? Well, if I'm a young girl right now and I start playing lacrosse, there are so many opportunities for me. Not to mention even the Olympics, the World Championships. Think about the opportunities for education. Lots of girls are combining lacrosse, their talents in lacrosse, in helping them with their education. So, lacrosse is still a small sport if you compare it to other things like hockey and soccer. So I think it's a really great entry sport for young girls to get into right now. So in '87, so the year we started getting the Ontario Women's Field Lacrosse organization going, we put together, Barb was working, started teaching at Ajax High School in the Durham region. And we got a grant from the Ministry of Tourism, Sport and Tourism, or Tourism and Recreation at the time, to run like a clinic. We called it a jamboree, the high school jamboree. And the idea was that this was going to start introducing schools in the Durham region to lacrosse. So we would be inviting girls from all the different schools. Barb connected with all the teachers, and we brought everybody out to start to learn the game of lacrosse. And I think this was a really significant event, because it really did kick off the start of high school lacrosse. And Carol Patterson and Jenny Kyle, who had been involved at the national level, reached out and touched base with Jackie Pitts in the US. And Jackie Pitts herself is a legend. She was a player, president, I think, of US Lacrosse, president of the International Federation, just an extremely passionate woman and so much enthusiasm. So we were really excited to have her come. So I think we had about 140 girls out, and Jackie helped teach the girls in a way that only Jackie could do, and get them excited about the game. But in preparation for this event, we had gotten through our grant, we were able to purchase some sticks. And it was Barb's job to go pick the sticks up. And so she had borrowed her brother's pickup truck and got the sticks, and she's coming back on the 401 to bring them back to Ajax. And she's driving along, and the guy pulls up beside her, and he's kind of waving at her. And she, turned around and didn't really know why, but, she kind of waved at him. And like he's going, and then she can see in the rearview mirror, the sticks are flying out of the flatbed of her truck. So she pulls off the 401, and starts to collect some of the sticks and then realizes that she's on the 401 and stops. And by the time she got to Ajax, she had, not all of them fell out, but she had a few that were twisted and tire tracks on them. But, in those early days, I feel like we did what we thought we had to do, and that was just one of those things. But the high school jamboree continued on for many, many years, and it was really a way that new schools could easily get introduced at the beginning of the season into the game. And I think, Barb did a pretty incredible job selling it to other teachers and trying to keep them excited and engaged. And I don't know how many schools in the Durham region are playing, but there are quite a number. And so that jamboree sort of kicked things off. Well, the Frank Piper Bain Award, that was sort of the first lacrosse award that I had gotten. And I think it felt significant for me because it was Orillia Minor Lacrosse was, lacrosse was for boys. And here was this one girls team, and there was an award for kind of the younger players and the older players. And then here was this girl who was winning it for the older players. So that was pretty exciting. Later on, I went on to coach Piper Bain's, what would it have been his granddaughter, his great-granddaughter, Jamie Beard, with a couple national teams. The first league that we kicked off with Ontario Women's Field Lacrosse was the Under-19 League. So we started the development really within the high schools, and by '97 we had significant growth, enough growth to within the communities that we felt that we were ready to launch an official provincial championship. So that took place in '97, and we combined it with the national championships. So it was actually ended up being the last national championships that were held up until this year. And so at the opening ceremonies, we were all lined up out on the field, and Orillia Minor Lacrosse had a field team there. And they were doing some introductions, and Carol and Wes Patterson were there, and I was standing out on the field, and my assistant, or my co-coach, Roxanne Curtis, was standing beside me, and I said to Roxanne, my brother Dave's I see my brother Dave on the sideline. And then, she's just kind of going, And then I said, oh, my mom's there too. And I'm looking, I see my whole family there. So then there was this ceremony where Carol and Wes came out, and they sort of unveiled this Joanne Stanga trophy that would be the championship trophy for Under-19. So it was a very special day. Barb said a few words, Roxanne said a few words, Cheryl had said a few words, and it just, they were three of sort of my key lacrosse colleagues, and still are today. So it really meant a lot coming from them. So really, really proud that level of lacrosse, which has really produced, starting at that from '97, some really strong lacrosse players, and given them, it continues to develop. And some of the games that I've witnessed at that level, just outstanding. And one of the few last times I was out to present the trophy, Orillia won it. So Orillia defeated the Oshawa Blue Knights that night at the Oshawa Civic. And the Oshawa Civic is a pretty significant venue for women's lacrosse. We've held a lot of our first nationals, well, not our first nationals, but we've held nationals there a couple times. We've had international tours there. We've had, all kinds of events. And After Wes Patterson passed away, we planted a tree, and we have like a little memorial rock there, because the Pattersons have been a really key part of all our activities as well. So that was 2012. At that time, my main involvement was really as a women's national team director. So I was involved sort of as in an administrative level with the national team. So I was not heavily involved anymore. I think for the most part, it was a really cool time to reflect, right, on, you know, all the things that have sort of led to where we are now. Pretty cool company too on that day, with all the other recipients. We had a ceremony in Whitby, and you know, just kind of rubbing shoulders with all the big guys in lacrosse was pretty special. And I think for me as well, you know, all of my family was there. My goddaughter Julie, who's, you know, really special. Just having everybody to celebrate it with, because, you know, when you're involved in something, you want to make like the people around you are the ones that sometimes suffer the most. So it's nice to be able to celebrate good things with them and share in that as well. I would say, you know, we talked about this earlier, that there were a lot of things in the game, in my working in the game, a lot on administrative level, maybe even more on a coaching level, because it was always a challenge for me. You know, as much as I helped in the, you know, development of a lot of the lacrosse programs, I think it helped develop me in a lot of the same ways. So really feel like I really owe a lot to the game.